Hmm.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, first of all, everybody, for joining this workshop. And as you know, this workshop is about product design. And originally, I invited Rit to speak on this topic, but he has some family emergency, couldn't make it. So that's why, please mute yourself. And Ash is Rit's colleague. Sorry, I'm gonna. Ash is Rit's colleague, as well as the lead designer at his company, and he's just as awesome as Rit. And Ash specializes in a domain called behavior design, and he has 20 years of experience in strategy roles at leading digital consultancy and companies. His enterprise clients have included Microsoft, PayPal, Ericsson, Intel, JCB, Oracle, etc. And he's also an author of a behavior design canvas, a design thinking framework. He's passionate about writing, and as I know, maybe playing guitar as well, evangelizing and educating about the field of behavior design. And he runs an online course on the subject, alongside his active project engagements. So here we have Ash. Please take over, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, great. Thanks. That was a sweet and short intro. And I guess we'll just jump right into the presentation itself. So I'm not like wasting anyone's time, as well as we make the best use of time possible. Just going to share my screen for you guys. Hang on. What up? Oh, yes. I'm still definitely not a power user of. Yeah, one of the worst things about recording on Zoom is that this terrible window with all the participants tends to show up. So I'd like have you guys minimize that if it's possible, so the audience can actually see the screen in the final recording. Kind of helps because anyways, so yeah, guys. So I guess I hope I'm able to see the chat, because obviously it'll be super cool if you guys have questions and you want to ask me questions. So I'm just trying to figure out. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Just like, I'm not very sure where I would receive questions, Zoe. Like if there were questions in text.
It will be on the chat. So anybody, if you have any questions, please feel free on chat.
All right. So yeah, what I'll do is exactly. So I guess if you guys just park your questions on chat as they come along, I'll pause from time to time as I have these kind of pauses in between the presentation, and I'll get into those questions. Alternatively, if I'm just like going too fast or it's too dense, somebody speak up and just say, hey, slow down, or what do you mean by that, etc. It's all cool. Okay. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. I muted.
Rock on. Yeah, great. So I'm going to take off. We are Noin is a design and innovation firm, and Rit, who's founder of Noin as well as chief creative director, he was asked to do this talk, but he couldn't, and I had like a day to basically put this stuff together. Rit and my specializations are not exactly the same. We are designers, and he does do strategic design work, but he's so much more end-to-end, and he's design leadership and stuff like that is his forte, as well as design systems and things like that. And I'm much more on strategy and in a very specialized area called behavior. So, which is what I'll take you into today, right? And really, this is like, I don't know if I'm going to give you any secrets today, but I'll definitely try to give you what for me is the most exciting thing in technology and design today and probably in the future. So we're a design and innovation agency. We've done a bunch of work for a lot of different clients, and it's actually Rit and myself both have kind of long careers. We've worked with some of these clients even before Noin. Noin's about 3 years old. And I'll show you a slide with my clients as well later, but that doesn't really matter. Essentially, we're designers, strategists. We work in service, UX, visual, behavior, but we're very much focused on digital, and we're very much focused on user experience. And we do get into technology, but it's up to front-end development. We're not yet someone who likes to do end-to-end technology development, but we do work very closely with shipping, with teams that ship in the capacity of designers and strategists. So we've actually worked with multiple startups by now. We've delivered across these skill sets that I mentioned to you. And we're very, very excited to talk to you guys. And working with startups is easily the most exciting thing in the business today. So happy to have conversations after this on that. And yeah, well, a few snapshots of our work. I'm not trying to pitch you here. I'm more interested in talking about a subject. This is a global loyalty program that we designed. This is something to do with a data center and data center management. And this is a portal connected to machine learning. So we've done a decent bit of like B2B, information dense, extremely complex interfaces and design solutions. We've also been on the consumer side. Again, in our career, both Rit and me, as well as our team, have been across all of these. And you can read each of these case studies in detail on the website, as well as contact Rit for anything connected to Zoin, as well as Zoin's cases itself. Sorry, yeah, Noin's cases itself. So the approach of the company is really to essentially follow a design thinking methodology, and that's the part I want to talk to you about today, really in more detail. This is the kind of the steps that Noin follows. Typically, there's a discovery phase. It's kind of get into definitions of trying to get more refined. Then we kind of get into designing, and we really like to be part of deploying and release of products as well, as I mentioned earlier. So, but before I, instead of explaining these phases the way we do it, I'll try to give you a more general picture, because I think the expectation of you guys coming here today was to figure out what is design thinking, first of all, how might we use it, and what is happening in this more specialized area of behavior within that space. So I'm going to get into exactly this process, but not as a pitch of how we do it, but rather as a kind of a narrative of how it's done, right? Hope that makes sense so far.
Hey, Ash, are you playing the slides? Because I think we can only see the splash slide, the first one.
Oh my God, I've actually moved across several slides by now.
Yeah, we only see the first one so far. So
what is going on? It says I'm sharing.
It is sharing, but it's not playing. Maybe you can try again. Otherwise, you can just go. We can see.
Interesting. Resume share. Wait a second. Are you able to see the secret of designing successful services now?
This we can see. Yeah.
Are you able to see it now?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I did 10 slides. Okay. So let me take you through the slides really quickly. Well, this is the the title of the talk. This is our the name of our company.
Change slides. I don't see the changes. It's still the secret of designing slides.
That is super annoying. I don't know what's going on.
It's fine.
What I could do it like this, you mean?
Yeah, this works fine. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. What happened? Okay. Yeah, works.
Yes.
You see it now? Great. Thanks for that heads up, Zoe.
No problem.
I totally missed that, obviously. So yeah, look, these are the slides. We worked for a bunch of clients, a few names there. A couple of slides that I talked to you about. We worked in these areas. Service design. We're a globally dispersed agency. We're a distributed team of experts. I'm based in Helsinki, for example, but I work with clients globally. These are snapshots of the work I was telling you about. The loyalty program, data center, design, innovation, and then machine learning portal called Skytree. So you can read about these cases online. And I was here trying to tell you that, look, this is our process. It's a pretty typical process we like to get from discovery and definition and design through to deployment and release, but I'll essentially go through these phases now more from a methodological perspective, right? Well, so we get to what is design thinking. Great. So when you talk about design thinking, I mean, now it's been around for more than a decade as a discipline, and you have, it's been around for longer. Nice, not too shabby. It's been around for longer, and before IDEO made it really famous. And essentially, when you think of design thinking, you have two aspects to it. One is the thing that comes across is very strongly a sense of process, which is on the left, but also the other thing that comes across is a sense of people, right? It's very people centered. And I think the complexity of the confusion that people usually have when practicing design thinking is how do you separate these two, or like how do these two elements fit together? You're working a lot with people, seems to be very methodological, and so on. So I think these two things have to be kept in mind, the two elements to it, no matter what framework you look at. There's a lot of different design thinking frameworks out there. I've made one of my own, which is focused on behavior. And I think keeping these two elements in mind is really important. So on the process side, you have things like methods, practices, frameworks, tools, pretty rigorous formal stuff, which you repeat and iterate. And on the people side, you have things like experience, you have research, you have insights, design, behavior, and so on. So very people, very soft, very qualitative. And really design thinking, if there's one slide, a very simple way for me to communicate it is we're putting people at the center of a very thorough and rigorous process. That's really the key. It is very process oriented, it is very iterative, but it's about putting people at the center. And so human-centered design as a discipline is not only where I situate myself, but I think it's also the right methodology to go with. And that's basically, we'll be going deeper into that space today, right? So I'll quickly take you through some design thinking frameworks. And these are, if you've somehow spent some time looking at design thinking, or if you're familiar with design thinking, then these are the models that should kind of appear to your mind, really, because these are the globally accepted frameworks, and they're the ones that are widely used both by startups as well as established across the industry, right? So one of the key frameworks is this idea of, we have desirability, which is very people-centered, but in order to make valuable solutions, we need to combine that desirability with viability, which is it business? Is it relevant for business? Does it make business sense? Does it have business value? But also more and more, is it technologically feasible, right? Especially for anyone working in the tech industry. This is one of those key ideas. Another idea is, well, in this triad, you have the idea that you begin with the desirability and begin with the user-centeredness, which I said before. So that's important. The other key framework picture is this really simple picture, which is at the very center of most design related work, which is a sort of a mental process where you diverge and you zoom out in some ways. You create choices, as this picture says, and then you kind of converge and you basically make choices. So it's a sort of constant zooming out and zooming in. And I guess you can actually zoom out and zoom in relation to these three areas as well, right? So that's a very core, simple process, but it's a very powerful process, and it's at the very core of design thinking, from where, if you extrapolate, you get things like this. This is the double diamond, and this is also a very standard and very well accepted process in the industry. And if you look at it, it's essentially a process of divergence and convergence, but replicated twice, right? In the first segment on the left, you have you go from discovery and definition, and then you go from development and delivery. And if you looked at our process, Noin's process, a few slides before, it was the very same, similar thing. And most design companies and designers, design thinkers tend to follow a process that kind of looks like this. So in the first segment on the left, you try to get insights and essentially you try to broaden your space in some sense, space of opportunity. And then you try to define what among those opportunities you choose to focus on, typically with people in the center. And then once you've had that problem definition kind of sorted out quite well, then you can do the same thing with solutionizing. So we try not to jump into solutions very quickly. We try not to, we try to deal with ambiguity, stay with ambiguity for longer periods of time. We don't try to make snap decisions about what is the right answer and so on. You kind of simmer in that ambiguity. And of course, then design is also about getting very detailed, very focused with solutions themselves, getting very highly refined with solutions. Great. And this is a newer version of what was on the previous slide. If you notice, the same double diamond in this screen is kind of repeated here, except this is more recent. And the guys who came up with this, the Design Council in the UK, the guys who came up with this framework, they've created this newer version where you have principles at the top and methods bank, and they've kind of opened it out and built it out, made it more elaborate, so to speak. But I would say this is it's a standard global design thinking framework. The other key framework, which I personally like very much, which kind of works, again, if you see there's a sort of, if you think about it, there's a sort of opening up and a sort of closing. You see, it's almost like half this. It's like if you drew a line through the center of this, and you kind of get this, right? It's like one of those triangles, the top of the hills on one of those triangles. And that's because essentially design is, and design thinking is a way of, if you look at, if you think this is time and you think of like everything below this line is sort of the concrete world, which is the real world, which is the world of technology, it's the world of materials, it's the world of, human like living and being. And this is the abstract world, which is mental, psychological, emotional, why we do things, our sense of identity, our sense of self, etc. Design has to live in both of these. I mean, design has to make sense here. It has to appeal to your identity. It has to appeal to why you do things and your purpose in life and things like motivation and stuff like that. But it's also got to be very functional. It's also got to not break, and it's also got to work when you turn the handle or push the button or swipe the card or what have you, right? So in some ways, what we try to do as designers and as design thinkers is to start somehow in the real world. Because if you start here, that's nice. It's nice to be inspired and to start with something really abstract. That's, good ideas and great execution can come from anywhere. Like, so there's no sort of, no one has a monopoly on that or a process on that. But typically we tend to start with something that's grounded in the real world, in what people are doing, for example, in where they are, their contexts. And that's where problems and all of those opportunities to solve problems, like I mentioned, that's where those things are, right? And then we use specialized tools to kind of take these observations, turn them into themes, and then turn them into like opportunities. And somewhere around here, you have frameworks happening up in the abstract space, and turn them into kind of solutions and prototypes. So prototypes come at this kind of very tail end, actually. And I think a lot of the time, designers could do this. I mean, this whole process, a designer could do this in 5 minutes if necessary. It's not like something that has to be done over a month of time, but that would be a pretty seasoned person who can do that. And therefore, while prototyping is super important, design thinking is not just prototyping. It's not just making something. There are clear differences between the process of sketching and the process of prototyping. There are authors, thinkers who've discussed these in detail. And I think kind of having the sense of being grounded in the world, doing abstract stuff, and then coming back to do concrete solutions is super important. So yeah, I've kept it very conceptual until this point, but any questions so far on the process itself? I have plenty of examples going into the presentation from here, and I will come back down to the earth, but I thought I should show you some of the key frameworks. So when you look at bad frameworks and you look at incomplete frameworks, you're able to distinguish and say, well, that doesn't look like a real design thinking framework, because the big problem is that there's just too much junk out there, as it is with anything, I guess. So yeah, I can happy to take any questions. Whoa, nice, I see chat. Oh, wow, yeah, that was Stan. Thanks. I hope you're able to see the slides now, Stan. I'm sorry, the slide should be bigger, but I hope the details are coming across. Great. Okay, no questions. I'm going to jump into this. You know, most of you, I've heard from Zoe that a lot of you are in the B2B space. B2B, you know, a huge problem with B2B and B2B consulting is that clients don't want you to show what you're working on. Like, no client is going to give me the permission to show what I'm really working on, because it's strategic and it's, you know, they're in business. So I did the best I can. I have brought some examples, but I have also brought a significant number of consumer examples. But I hope you will suspend your sort of, you know, proclivity to B2B for a moment and try to follow my train of thought here. So I'll quickly show you a video, actually a couple videos, and I hope this audio is coming through. Zoe, just let me know.
No, we can't see the video.
You can't see the video. Great.
But we can hear
Got it. So that means it's not doing full screen. Oh, okay. Let me do it like this. This is Zoom is bugging me. Right on. Let me start again. Now you should be able to see it.
I don't think we can see.
You can't see the video.
If it's on YouTube, I assume you can play it on YouTube and share the website, like share your whole screen or something, so that we can.
I am playing it on YouTube and I'm sharing the screen.
Try to share the others.
Okay, one second. Let me.
Somebody left.
All right. Hey, yeah, I think.
Like, let customers know that.
Okay, look, guys. Now you're good.
Yes, now
it should work.
We're about making better products. And what I love about the consumer market that I always hated about the enterprise market is that we come up with a product, we try to tell everybody about it, and every person votes for themselves. They go yes or no. And if enough of them say yes, we get to come to work tomorrow. You know, that's how it works. It's really simple. As where the enterprise market, it's not so simple. The people that use the products don't decide for themselves. And the people that make those decisions sometimes are confused. So we love just trying to make the best products in the world for people and having them tell us by how they vote with their wallets whether we're on track or not.
Right. I think that's a really, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And I think this idea of the consumerization of the enterprise is probably in some ways the biggest trend in recent years. And it's not just, you know, Steve Jobs talking about it. You should watch this guy who is a VC. Sorry about that.
The very common question that I get asked as someone with a technical background who started a company are, what are the new trends? And what people expect to hear from someone like me is like, oh, it's IoT, it's AI, it's blockchain, whatever. And those are all really interesting technologies. But honestly, I think there's a trend that's much more significant and much more disruptive that's happening. And it's kind of a meta trend or a macro trend. And it's a trend that I've been obsessing with now for the last couple of years. And I think it's going to shape basically the entire B2B landscape for the next 10 years. So what do these companies have in common? It's not blockchain, it's not AI, it's not IoT. So it turns out the thing that they have in common is that they've decided to go to market in a way that's very different than traditional B2B. So they decided to first do what we call growth, which is a very consumer bottom-up motion. And then they decided to overlay sales after that. So we call this B2B growth sales. But the implication is today you can build a company using two motions, which basically is fully advantageous to startups, and it's very difficult for incumbents to defend against. For number one, they tend to require a lot less money to start. They're much less focused on typical execution. To be a founder of a B2B growth startup or B2B growth sales, it's much more about being very, very good at product and much less about understanding channels and understanding sales. But right now, like, the incumbents really don't have any defense strategy against this. Like, it's very hard for like a Cisco or an IBM or an HP or an SAP to defend against this sort of a motion. And not only that, because the growth motion, which I'm going to talk about, is really a marketing-led motion, B2B startups can now really come from anywhere. And that's just not been the case in the past. There's really been very, very few centers for real strong B2B companies. And now we're seeing them everywhere. Berlin, France, UK, certainly New York, as well as Silicon Valley. Now, growth in some of these motions have been around for a very long time, right? When Salesforce, especially in vertical SaaS. So like, Salesforce for a very long time has been doing like freemium. The reason I'm giving this talk now is because the trend is so massive, it cuts across basically every vertical, whether that's security, it's open source, it's developer tooling, it's bottoms-up SaaS, it's infrastructure, it's cloud services. I would say any successful modern company, the chances are that it's using this strategy today. And if companies are not using this strategy, they're actually at a disadvantage.
Right. So I think the guy makes the point that are you able to see consumerization of the enterprise now? No.
No, I can't see
Here
it.
we go. Great. Anyway, so I hope the point came across, right? And I thought that talk is really wonderful. I can, of course, share it with you. But this idea that in some ways, how different is B2B and B2C when it comes to user-centered design? Not that much. You still have to think about, the human being who uses the product. You still have to think about what value it has for them. They still have to find value in what you're providing. It still has to be seamless, understandable, delightful, and it should, resonate with them. And if you get growth happening like that in a bottoms up fashion, as the guy said, then you have something that really wins. So I think the reason is this. I'm sorry for this it's pretty blurred, but it's a screenshot from a TED talk. But this guy is talking about how someone's day is divided. And if you can see, managing life, preparation, discovery, self-expression, me time, socializing, he's kind of talking about marketing and where you market, which moments in the day you market into. And the reason this consumerization of enterprise is happening is because there is no more distinct moments between work and play, especially now with remote becoming so popular. The same device that runs those business app is the device on which the user checks their social media, is where they play games. They're moving between the same devices and the same device ecosystems. And so their expectations are very high. The expectations created by the consumer market is what you see happening in fintech, is what you see happening in all kinds of areas, health or what have you, right? Retail. And all of those will obviously impact, I think, B2B as well. And B2B startups who can think in terms of at least the users. I mean, surely you're creating a technology and you're solving business problems and all of that, which is great, which is required. But if you're unable to, kind of account for the fact that it has to be used by a human who has flaws, who has biases, who has certain patterns and ways of doing things, and who has certain expectations and limitations on time, then I don't think you wouldn't be able to nail that part. So this is like a screenshot from a study by CB Insights, and top reasons startups fail, right? And a lot of startups would say, well, a lot of startups fail because they have a product without a business model or even poor marketing, right? But actually, these things are very low on the list. Any guesses on what would be right at the top of this list? Hi, guys. Okay. So yeah, I think, whoa, hello. Yeah. So no market need at the top. I mean, almost 50%. Unbelievable, right? How can almost close to half the startups actually start a startup and build something for a no market need? Is there no way to find out first if there is a market need for something before you build anything? Right? And that's why we get into the whole idea of human behavior and being behavior driven when it comes to a startup, and how all of this what this has to do with growth. So a little bit about me. Well, I'm a strategist at Noyan, and I essentially try to look at how to apply behavioral science really in digital services, products, and innovation. Had a interesting career across consulting and design schools, etc., and started a behavioral collective in 2012 called Fabric. And I've been partnering with Noyan for a while. I'm sorry, there's another company with Z that also is spelled exactly like Noyan that I interact with, so I keep mixing up those names. Please forgive me. I've been partnering with Noyan for quite a while, and these are some of the clients I've worked with across my career. So just a little bit about me. And I think on this journey here, really around when I was at Fjord, a little bit past Fjord, which is now with Accenture Interactive, innovation firm, I kind of got really interested in the idea of behavior versus experience. And we've been designing experiences. There's an industry out there that designs experiences, but an experience is something that's subjective. It's like if you had a good experience and I had a good experience on this call, it would be really hard to kind of measure how those compare. But the behavior is that you asked 3 questions, you arrived at the call like 1 minute before time, you couldn't see the slides, all of these are concrete data points. And so I was very interested in measurement and analytics, and therefore business relevance, but also societal impact. And I realized, well, experience really cannot be measured, but behavior can be measured. And I said, let's get into the behavioral side of things. And there was this field called behavior design shaping up, so I started to be super interested in that. And if you also look at from cybernetics perspective, or other kinds of the media theory and so on, this relationship between technology and behavior has always been really strong. The fact that technology changes behavior. For example, I show these slides a lot, and I love showing these slides because it's so concrete, because did you have a good experience with Uber? Yeah, sure. Did your neighbor have a good experience with Uber? Maybe. So, right? That's the world of experiences. It's arbitrary. But let's look at the world of behavior. Before you had Uber, the way you used a cab was you would call and walk to a cab. You would and then you would ride the cab, and you would pay the cab. And after digital, you essentially map and pick, you pay, you ride, and you rate. So the behaviors that you actually do when you engage with a digital service are completely different compared to the non-digital one. Look at how we're shopping now, right? Earlier, I mean, I still shop the good old way, but shopping is also quickly becoming where you're actually having a conversation. You're ordering something in the middle of a conversation and with Alexa or whoever, and you're using a product and you're probably rating it, or if it's bad, not thinking about it again, right? So the actual behaviors of how we shop are changing. The behaviors of how we will practice health are changing, where it's becoming so much more about being proactive, where the past was you'd stress about symptoms, you would schedule an appointment, you would, with a lot of difficulty, consult a doctor and medicate. But now you buy something that tells you proactively what you should or should not be doing, your stats and so on. You wear it, you refer to it, and you try to improve. And of course, if there is a problem, then you attend to it. So again, behaviorally, every single fundamental thing that we do, date, educate ourselves, is entirely getting disrupted. So my theory or my proposal is that the disruption is not in terms of technology, the disruption is actually in terms of behavior. That's the real disruption that's going on in the world today. And so when you think about behavior design as a function of design, looking at those frameworks and stuff which I showed you before, the idea is that behavior design is something that drives people to action. It's about driving people to action in a context. It's stuff that people do. And I think there's a lot of confusion in business between trying to understand or distinguish between what customers say and actually what they do, right? If you look at, this is an example from Quora. I'm on Quora, right? And I'm trying to research this. Is there a physical difference between females' eyes and males' eyes, or their vision generally? I was trying to figure this out for this presentation. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm in that flow. I'm thinking I'm making a presentation. Is there a difference between male and female's vision? I've read some research about it. I'm in that mindset. And Quora pops this up to me and says, Ashwin, do you speak Finnish? I live in Finland. Do you speak Finnish? Join the Finnish community on Quora. Don't worry, English will remain your primary language and you can easily switch between them. Now, Quora is a great service, don't get me wrong, but isn't this such an irrelevant message in this moment? Like my behavior, what I'm doing is reading English material, and Quora wants to know if I speak Finnish. Now, even if I did, like, isn't there a better time to ask, or how is it augmenting what I'm trying to achieve right now, right? Just because my IP is from Finland, these guys want to know and try to promote their Finnish channel to me. So not only is this behavior much more valuable, like what I'm doing is much more valuable to Quora, this is just something that I say. I could say yes, I could say no, I could change my mind. That's why things like, net presenter score, net promoter scores, all these things like declared user, customer and user data is just declared data. People can say stuff in a moment, they can change their mind the next day, but it's what they do and what they do again and again is what really matters, right? And so behavior becomes super important. I'm not saying don't ask people what they say, but focus on behavior. So look at this example from Facebook. So this morning, I saw this, Vitalik Buterin, he donated $1 billion of some crypto to India's COVID relief. They set up a virtual fund. I posted this on my Facebook, and immediately Facebook said, add a donate button, right? Add a donate button to post or raise money. That's an excellent intervention. It's a good behavioral intervention because I am in that mode. I'm Indian. I am posting some news that I'm happy about. And this is relevant, unlike the previous example. So this is a good moment for me it's a moment when I would potentially take action and say, should I create a personal fundraiser? Or, it hooks me there. So that's I would say good behavior design. There's another example from Facebook market, and I'm not trying to sell Facebook here. I'm not even saying Facebook is amazingly designed, but they do have some good examples of behavior design in there. There's this idea of the digital nudge, right? A nudge, what is it? Anyways, any questions before I go into this? Okay, just hit me on chat, guys. So there's the idea of like a digital nudge, and nudging is a concept from behavioral economics, and it's getting a little bit slowly starting to come into digital. We work a lot with digital nudges. I personally enjoy working with them or educating about them, especially. And if you look at these 4 products on Facebook Market, see that little tag there that says nearby. That's makes a huge difference, because it gives you that extra push to go out and probably try buying the product, right? Because finding a nice used product on Facebook Market is one thing. Making the effort to actually go there, I find this, okay, this is a good, looks like a good amplifier on the top there, top left. But wow, if it's across town and the weather is bad, or I don't know, I have other things to do, it might be cheap, but would I go? I don't know. So the big difference I think Facebook figured out in this case, the big difference between a sale happening or not happening is actually proximity. And so they're indicating there that it's nearby. It's very gentle. It's not a push. It's not forcing you. It's merely just suggesting something that you could do. And therefore, in that way, it nudges behavior. All right. Whereas, let's look at this one. This is from a user interface that I saw on Medium, and it is what it is. I mean, it's basically, look, there is, it's a feature that lets someone pull a request, and then, there are reviewers, there are builds, and it's a Slack-like interface, you could say, where there's collaboration happening. And I think the product's called Bitbucket. So if you look at this, really, I mean, there's a few things going on here. One is, this is where the whole, do men and women see colors differently, was something that I was researching. Because when I look at interfaces that have this much color on them, there is a micro design logic here which says that, okay, reviewers are green, the actual, change or feature push is red, the person who's kind of making the request is in blue, and there is a certain color coding logic here. There's no doubt about that. But with all these colors on the screen, how readable is this? And especially, well, this is not like research that's proven that men and women, actually see things differently. There's some research that says they do, and some research that says they don't. And the research that says they do, it says that females are better at discriminating among colors. There seem to be some differences, but there's no doubt actually that people have a lot of diversity, just irrespective of gender. They have a lot of diversity when it comes to color. So just at the level of color, I don't know how much sense this much use of color makes. The second thing, which is even more closer to behavior, is actually, you actually have this interesting look at how I've turned this, put these kind of circles here. There is this nudge reviewers, nudge users with direct messages, right? And I'd see, that's why I say that the idea of nudging is very early in the digital world, because nudging someone is not like sending them a message. This here is not sending you a message. A nudge is a feature of the environment which helps you make decisions. And it's not something that comes at you. It's not a trigger. Whereas this is much more of a trigger. So essentially, even though it's called a nudge, if all these nudges start going out at these guys, you're going to end up with a human being that's like this. So one nudge is fine, but 200 nudges to do something about all those requests. So you see, it's asymmetrical power on the interface, because I can send you a nudge and you just have to passively receive it. And therefore, if you start receiving 2,000 nudges tomorrow, you're going to quit your job or you're going to complain. It's not a nudge anymore. It becomes almost dominating. You see what I mean? So while these ideas are starting to come into this field, they're still not executed, I think, properly. And they have to be executed with care, responsibility, and also in an experimental style. Of course, I'm very happy to talk about any of these things. You can reach out to me, but I have to move on. And actually, there is a lot of evidence in psychology, in behavioral science research, that nudges actually fail as well. No one's talking about the failed nudges. There is elaborate research on the kinds of nudges that fail, why nudges fail, why nudges backfire. There's all that research. But right now we are at the kind of at the crest of that peak of inflated expectations, as Gartner would say, where there's all this kind of lot of hype about, oh, nudges and nudges and nudges. But I think nudges need to be done well. Nudges need to be understood. What are they? And so on. So this is a nudge that we developed with my students in class, and I just submit it for your review. But the whole idea is we're trying to provide a small health level of engagement of the user inside Slack. It's a Slack interface redesign. So, and it says your engagement level is moderate. This is what you should kind of typically do in order to be more engaged with your community. It's in the background. You can set a reminder to do more, to be more engaged in the community, but nothing's coming at you, nothing's pushing you, nothing's saying do this now. So we think this is much more of a nudge, a healthy nudge, than the previous example. All right. So my journey goes on. So what I did was, as you can see, nudge is like one little thing here, right on the right corner. I've worked with all of these. In the last 10 years, I got super interested in this idea of behavior and behavior design and started exploring things like decision-making, triggers, persuasion, framing, personality types, motivation, et cetera, And initially, I started doing it in a pretty random way, right? A client would come to us and I would say, well, maybe you can apply a motivation theory there, or have you looked at this choice architecture or this and that? And I realized over time that I needed a more elaborate framework. And so I created something called the Behavior Design Canvas. It is the first canvas for behavior design that exists, I think. So I'm pretty proud of that. But how good it is, only time will tell. But I'm pretty excited, and the uptake has been quite good in the last half a decade or so. Taught it in multiple workshops, multiple companies applied it on multiple projects. And basically, it goes like this. The canvas has 3 parts. The first part is a part where you target the behavior change, and you have essentially 2 boxes. Maybe I'll show you the full canvas first. So on the first part here, you have target, and essentially you try to target what is the desired behavior that you're looking for the user, the customer, the stakeholder to do, and how that would be different from the present behavior. The second part, you basically align that behavior with user motivation. You see, motivation is very required for someone to do anything. But you also need something called ability. You need motivation and you need ability. You need to be able to do the behavior. So the second part goes into that. It aligns the motivation of the user with the behavior. And it also looks at the ethics of asking them to do that behavior. Is it in their best interest? And the third part is actually the shaping of the behavior itself, where we pick up from a habit loop. There are habit loops have been studied quite a bit in psychology, and we try to break down that behavior change or that behavior into its parts, right? So like I said, the first part essentially is targeting the behavior change, and the idea is to be very specific with what kinds of behaviors you want. For example, on an interface like this, I think B2B interfaces, one of the things they suffer from, or where they get really complex, it's not easy, is that they have to do they have to provide a lot of insights and surface a lot of information, and at the same time drive behavior, drive action. And if you look at this thing here, there's only like a smart bar on the top. What would you want to do, right? And everything else on this interface is not something that's actionable. It's all something that I can absorb, but there's nothing I can do about it right there. And there is the idea called Miller's law in psychology, which says that the number of items you can hold in your working memory is about 7, give or take 2 items, and that number is coming down. So I would say four items are what you can hold in your working memory. So like, which of these things should I as a stakeholder take any action on? And if I choose not to act on this, paid impressions or whatever, how long can I hold that in my memory for it to be useful? So we need to rethink interfaces from a behavioral perspective, not just from a good visual design or a good data visualization perspective. Because when you're consuming a data visualization, you're static. You're just, you're learning something. But when you're designing an interface where you want to drive action, the intention or the purpose behind the interface is totally different. There's something called the choice overload effect. You kind of decision making is drastically affected by information load. Let's get to the second part. Second part of the canvas. I hope you're following my thread. We are on this canvas. We looked at target. We're going to the second part of the canvas, which is user motivation. Like I said, user motivation is super important, and we do that through user research, and that's where research and some of the early stage activities in our process is focused. For example, when we did this transformation and innovation work, trying to create new product lines for a very established professional services firm in the Nordics, we found that although the management wanted to automate certain parts of the entire flow of business and delivery of value, you had the sales team and actually leaders in the sales team resisting automation because they preferred having the old way of high touch sales where their role was important. And if you started to automate some of that, they didn't want that. So what happened was, even though you wanted the new system, wanted certain behavior changes to happen on the part of the sales team or the sales leaders, because the sales leaders were not motivated, as we discovered when we ran the Canvas workshop with multiple stakeholders in the organization, they essentially fell in the no box, right? And when you figured out that they were not motivated, then you were like, oh no, we need to amplify motivation of the users in question if this behavioral change has to happen. Otherwise it's not going to happen. And so that's how the Canvas parts actually work, in the sense that they help solve very concrete problems at a conceptual level before you write any code, before you do any design. Great. This is it's a complex picture from a very large customer that I worked with some years ago. Was it 2018? Yeah. And the idea was, I'm just trying to show this to say that, the idea of motivation and motivational thinking can be applied deep inside tech as well. And we did something exploratory work there for something called a behavioral engine, which was embedded deep inside their technology. Most of the actual details have been, deleted and made XX here. So unfortunately, it's all confidential, as most of my work. But all I can say is this is in the retail space, and essentially we were trying to, embed user motivation deep inside an algorithmic and decision-making system. So it can be applied in a very, in tech itself, in tech architecture itself, and but also with very practical adoption stuff in the B2B context, like in this case. And cool. This is also the place where, like I said, motivation is the place where we need to understand ethics clearly and bring ethics, especially when these kinds of things are happening. Artificial intelligence is misreading human emotion. So why do we want to read emotions from faces? Why do we want to detect what is intent? Does the user want their intent to be detected? That's where it's at. And finally, the last piece on the canvas is the behavioral shaping. It's essentially, it's a habit loop that you have there, and we're trying to create a loop of behavior where the user is cued or there's a trigger, the user takes some kind of action, and there is some kind of appropriate reward for the user. It's a classic habit loop, and this is where behavioral shaping happens. And I think these sorts of behavioral shaping is slowly happening in the consumer space. For example, this is from Dropbox, where you're able to play videos in Dropbox. Now you're able to comment on videos. So getting people to do more stuff with videos in Dropbox itself means that people will upload more videos to Dropbox, which means that they will need to justify or find a reason to have to buy more Dropbox space, because it's a space business, right? So it makes a lot of sense. This is something that we did from one of our projects, where we tried to shape a new behavior where we embedded these notes that the user could personally drop in at any point in the video. So the idea was that we wanted to bring users from YouTube and get them to use this platform, which was a B2B platform, a e-learning platform in the travel industry. And we created these sorts of retention hooks and measures. So yeah, I have a lot of other examples and stuff, but I'm out of time. So I'm gonna just like give it over to Q&A, and I'll see if I can, take you through another example or two. But I just wanted to close by saying that basically you can write to studio@Knowin or contact Zoe. And we're happy to send you the behavior design canvas, send you a digital copy, and a few slides of how that can be used. It's a Creative Commons licensed framework, and these are our social media profile spots where you can find us, follow us, and do stuff. But yeah, thanks very much for your time, and yeah, just happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ash. Anybody, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can just type it on the chat box on the bottom. Actually, I'm just gonna give you the permission to unmute yourself, everybody. Feel free
Sweet.
to just drop in.
Nice.
I think I booked the time until 10:15.
Cool.
While we were waiting for the questions, maybe Ashley, if you want to go over, like you said, a few more examples.
Right. I
Very
can do that. Let me do that. Close this. So yeah, bam, 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 bam. Yes, shaping behavior. So this is a product that we did for a company that's trying to build habits and productivity habits based out of the US, a startup actually. All of these examples are startup examples, at least from our cases. And one of the things that we figured out about the users through research was that actually, in order to have them be productive the next day or in any given day, going to bed and winding down well the night before was super important. And so this is an interface which kind of tries to shape that behavior. It's it's two variations of the same interface. On the left, we have these two. This is one variation on the left of 1 and 2, which is a more minimalistic design. It's just information based. There's no iconic. There's no virtual or a graphic representation of any of the actions there. It's just something that users can kind of say, well, let's set your routine for tonight. You swipe up, and then you basically kind of pick between 2 or 3 modes. I want a short, a medium, and a long routine, and it kind of generates your routine. This one on the right is a little bit more of a timeline where you can customize it a bit more. And you say, I want to do yoga, drink tea, groom myself, stretch, and add these activities and say go. And it kind of basically, it will remind you in the evening that your wind down routine has started. And so you don't do toxic behaviors like have too many drinks on a weekday, or just basically smartphone, just like surf the smartphone, surf the internet, which is one of the biggest reasons today why people don't fall asleep on time. Whereas you need all the other things like stretching, taking a shower, having tea. And the interface on the right is the same interface, but in a slightly more iconic, like I said, more visual for people who prefer more visual interfaces, where there's clear visual representation of what's going to happen. So this is an example of how we essentially looked at core behavior change in the user's life as a reason to adopt the product and turn that research into interfaces. And actually, this startup has now got first customers. They've pivoted a couple of times after this even, and we've been working with them continuously. So what happens is when you think about behavior, it also resonates very closely with growth. It resonates with the funnel. You can actually map behavior changes to specific points in the funnel. You can turn those into analytics. And there's an entire field of behavioral analytics shaping up now. So it's very handy. It works very well with growth, to be honest. And this is a kind of like, an example of what running experiments on variants would be. So if you can split test that core user journey and look at funnel moments, which are kind of what you would like to happen versus what should happen, and then kind of develop design interventions for those moments, then I think you're in a pretty decent space. Cool. I guess my last slide is really about retention. And if you guys are thinking about growth, what you should focus on is retention. For example, up here, you have this, nice framework from Sequoia, which I always love. The problem that if you, on the left, you have growth, just net growth, and you can add a lot of users, but you market aggressively and add a lot of users, but if you're not retaining them, you're going to turn into a leaky bucket, right? On the other hand, you might just be able to hold on to users, but you don't get enough users. Bottom right, you end up with a small market. And the trick is how to do both at the same time. And I think kind of product market fit is somewhere, it's some kind of mystical place between these two in some ways. But retention is so important, right? If you don't hold on to anyone, and so I think in the B2B case, if the buyer is, if the user is getting more and more independent, the B2B user is becoming more and more the decision maker, then the growth of B2B products is going to look much more like B2C products, and that in the sense that they are going to make the decisions, just like, say, for example, Slack. So getting that kind of resonance, being relevant to their needs, stuff like that becomes super important if you want to grow there and actually not be a leaky market, or not just have a small market. And finally, is this just a few, oops. Yeah. Wow. My slide just decided not to move anymore. Oh yeah, here it is. Retain users, right? There's good research that retained users are the most valuable kinds of users to have. Increase retention, they buy more often, they come back, they bring other people, they are your internal marketing engine. So looking at how behavior change can drive retention is really the key if you're looking for growth. With that, I think I'm done. Something on chat. What criteria consider to correctly implement nudges in a product? Is it the user who dictates it? No, the user can't dictate design. So design is a specialized activity which users do not know how to do. They don't know how to nudge because they don't know how to design. And I can't do it either when I'm a user, but I'm a designer. So hopefully I can design some self nudges. But typically, we can't expect users to be the one who dictates it. But it has to be aligned with their interest. That's what I mean. We need to design nudges. Being specialists, we take principles of nudging. We take the principles of choice architecture. We look carefully at environments, at the system. We research with users, and we design nudges. So we have to do all that. It's not coming from the user. The user's just doing their lives, right? But it is definitely, it's not a nudge if it doesn't have the user's best interest at heart. It has to help them make progress. It has to help their life get better. It has to, be valuable, useful to them. So in that sense, they are the final thumbs up or thumbs down. Any more questions? That's a great question, by the way, Alessandra.
Perfect. Also, I just launched a poll. If you could give us some feedback for the workshop, that would be really great. And if you have more questions, please feel free to just turn your audio on, video on to ask or post on the chat. Okay, I think we don't have
Great.
questions then. Thank you everyone for joining today's workshop. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you would like to learn more about what Ash taught, feel free to reach out to him or reach out to me. Happy to connect you guys.
Absolutely. You can look for Ashwin Rajan on LinkedIn. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Yes, just hit me
Thank
up
you,
on
Ashwin. That was
LinkedIn.
great talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback. Wow. So please reach me on LinkedIn, and I hope you have a sunny, great weekend wherever you are, and be safe. Take care. Have fun. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.